Welcome back, team. How's it going? Today we're going to be going through my updated top lane tier list for the new patch that just dropped today. Now, because I know how much you all love these tier lists, we're actually going to be going through three of them. My high elo tier list, which you have on your screen right now, a below emerald one, and also one for emerald and diamond. So three top lane tier lists, and we're mainly going to be touching on the things that have changed on this patch and the reasoning for the differences between the lists. So starting with our S tier, nothing's changed there. You might be surprised that Riven might have, you might have assumed that she'd bounce down to A tier because they did change Orange Blade, so you can no longer proc Jack of all trades very easily. So this does affect champions like Riven, champions like Fiora, but in my opinion, it's not the end of the world. Riven has a lot of great secondaries that you can take, so it doesn't really change that much. I've talked to my Riven students about it. They're kind of feeling the same way, so I would keep her in S tier for now. It's really similar to Fiora, even though I think she's gone down a little bit. The Jack of all trades spike was quite nice. That just means you don't have to buy your tier 1 boots. You get Ravenous Hydra 300 gold cheaper, so there's kind of a trade-off, and you can take different secondaries like Sun Impact, something like that, and be a bit more volatile in the early game. Now, some champions I've moved around, you might be surprised to see, is Teemo. Teemo's a champion I've definitely been, I don't think I've been sleeping on him, but I haven't been awake enough. He's very, very powerful on the patch, and this new patch that just dropped, he's even stronger because they nerfed D-Shield and Second Wind. Now, the D-Ring buff doesn't affect Teemo that much, the extra mana regen, he doesn't go but the D-Shield Second Wind nerf does help him a lot. Second Wind really good against Teemo, because it's not just you get shot once, the poison's constantly ticking, so your Second Wind is refreshing, so that being nerfed does help him a lot. They don't get a flat amount anymore, they just get the missing HP. It's not the the biggest nerf of all time, but definitely it is going to be noticeable versus a good Teemo player. Same with Aurora, same with Rumble, they're all in that similar category, where most champions cannot really play well against him in lane, and with no D-Shield, no Second Wind, it's going to be harder to stay even in farm. Now, Jax, I'd say, even after the buff, he's still got the same problem as before. Neutralizer matchups like Gragas, like Cannon, like Aurora, or Jace, if they're good players, you're not really going to gain a lead, but he's just so tanky in early fights and skirmishes right now, so definitely as value goes up, the game has evolved maybe, into just fighting for every objective. So it's all pretty similar. One noticeable change is the Gwen buff. So I'm probably going to be moving Gwen higher up throughout the week, but right now I'm going to keep her in low A tier. The buff is really massive. You're really going to notice not only the increased damage from passive QR, but also the increased slow. It's actually going to be very frustrating to play against, which means, of course, Gwen's value goes up, but there is a bit of a trade-off, the E-mobility nerf. You're really going to feel it if you are a Gwen player. So I do want to keep around low tier for now. I do believe she's probably going to end up, around here probably by the end of it. But I'm just going to keep an eye on her because she still has a bunch of bad matchups. It is hard to play Gwen into a good Rumble, good Jace, good, all those players. And these champions are very popular and high rank. Now for B tier, I'm close to promoting Olaf and Urgot. I think these two have a lot of value. The D-Blade buff is quite nice for Olaf. You notice the healing on your E definitely. On Urgot doesn't really change a lot, but D-Shield Second Wind nerf is great for champions that don't take those runes, which is Olaf and Urgot. They don't take D-Shield, they don't take Second Wind very often. Olaf sometimes D-Shield, but what I'm saying is that these champions are going to do better into Second Wind D-Shield abusers like Mbessa and stuff like that. Cassante, so definitely I would call it a buff. I'm really close to putting them in low A tier. I still believe they have a pretty hard matchup spread, and there are just some comps that they play into that are quite difficult, so I'm going to keep them top of B tier for now. So other than that, nothing's really changed a lot. I've moved up, Bernard because D-Shield nerf and the D-Blade buff. You're probably going to feel it on him a little bit. Just to, put in perspective, I'm going to make a video on D-Blade to D-Shield later on through the week, but to put in perspective, level 1 Garen E, so the AoE is nerfed for the healing on D-Blade, so level 1 Garen E on a champion will give you about 4 HP back. 4 HP for a fully extended E, but if you hit the whole wave and the champion, you'll get around 20 to 22. We're not nerds here, we're not going to crunch the numbers too much or anything like that, but that is noticeable. 22 HP per, 20 HP per wave. If you're Eing, every wave or two, you're definitely going to feel it. So AoE spells, even though it's a bit weaker in terms of 1v1, if you're hitting them in the wave, you are going to feel it. So champs like Aatrox, if you can go D-Blade, champs like Garen, it's definitely going to be a noticeable change in matches where D-Blade is possible. But I don't feel like you're going to be able to build it every game. If you're playing Garen versus Jace or, something like that, you can't really go D-Blade, but the matchups where you can, like a Riven or like a Darius, it's definitely going to feel a lot stronger. And other than that, it is all pretty similar here. One champion I bumped up a little bit is Kayle. That's just mainly as a counter pick. I think if you use her as a counter in the right spots, she can definitely be around C or B. Actually, I'm going to be up to B tier. If you're only picking her in the right spots, I think she's probably going to be placed around here, similar to Vlad. So she's a really solid champ. She's still a bit slow for top lane. I think you can get away with scaling in mid, because you're also versus another champion that scales, like an Ori or something. But in top lane, if you're playing Kayle, you're running around with recurve bow and Berserker Greaves versus like Iceborne, Swifty Boots versus Iceborne Cassante. He's going to be 20 times more useful than you at all the fights. So I'd still, even though she is strong in good matchups, I'd keep her around B tier for now. And other than that, I've moved a couple champs down. Yorick, the champ's just pretty useless. He doesn't really contribute a lot to a game. Not fun to lane against, but not that useful in the game. Monster plus split pushing is not really a stable win condition, which is why champs like Trundle, champs like Tryndamere don't normally do that well. Of course, some one tricks that are really good at them can make them work, not saying it's impossible, but that's kind of the reasoning there. So other than that, pretty similar to our previous list. Moving on to our Emerald to Diamond tier list. Now, that is a pretty big range, to be honest. Emerald 4 to D1, you can imagine very different skill levels, but I'm going to do my best to break them down as I go. So, starting with S tier, you might be surprised to see Kayle so high, and the reason why is you're still not going to be versing players that are consistently good enough to punish you enemy top and jungles. Like, sure, if you verse a Jax Elise top jungle duo and they're best friends in Discord, you're probably going to get Dova bunch, but on average, they're not going to be good enough to punish you consistently. If you're a good Kayle player, and also from my experience coaching a lot of Kales, around Emerald to Diamond, they really start to get good at having consistent early games, and really starting to space well. We're in Silver and Bronze, lower ranks, Kayle, even though you will get your items eventually, you're probably going to be behind a lot of the time, because spacing is a difficult skill to learn. And Emerald and Diamond, they really start to develop that. But in my opinion, from watching both sides of it, the melee players are worse at playing versus range champions around Emerald Diamond than the range champion is playing into the melee. So pretty much what I mean by that, when the range champion's playing, you want to be trying to space them, try to stay high HP and chip away at them and get them too low to the point where they can't all in you. With the melee champion, you need to be actively hunting to punish the range champion's spacing mistakes and put pressure on them to do so. Right behind them around the bush, it looks scary, try to punish them on the minion, randomly pretend to leave and run at them and punish their spacing mistake. That's a skill that's really hard to develop, and I'd say a lot of Emerald and Diamond players, they don't really try as actively to punish the range champion as they could, so Kayle can get through a lot of matchups quite freely. Same with Urgot as well, where I would say in lower ranks, even though Urgot's an amazing champion still, a lot of players play Urgot kind of like a melee, so Urgot vs Garen is just a fight to the death. They're not abusing the range advantage as much as they could be, but the Emerald and Diamond Urgot mains, they definitely start to, so definitely a very, very good champ. Great blind pick as well. And Warwick, just amazing blind pick power. If you got to Emerald or Diamond playing Warwick, you probably have good mastery on him and understand the limits quite well. And no one that doesn't play Warwick knows that anyone that doesn't play Warwick doesn't understand the limits, so you can still get early game advantages consistently. Now, other than that, in A tier, these champions require you to be one tricks, of course, for your Riven, but if you got the Diamond playing Riven, definitely a high A tier champ. The reason why they're not an S tier, these players throw quite a lot, and it's less about the players, but more about the champion's power in the rank. It's hard not to throw on them, you have to execute quite a fine line, so definitely it's pretty rare I'll see a Fiora or Riven player have consistently low deaths, because it is hard to execute and get your damage down without dying, so I'll keep them in A tier for now, but they just snowball so hard, and if you are a main on the champion, and you got to Emerald or Diamond, you probably know all the matchups quite well, so you will be getting your leads consistently. Now, Singe you might be surprised to see here, and that's just because this playstyle, if you're a Singe one trick, getting to these ranks, you're probably going to be really good at the proxy attack mid, proxy attack jungle, and this playstyle works quite well in these ranks. It works really well, actually. Other than that, not really much changes here. Gwen buffs moved her from, I think I had around here last time, up to around here. And the reason I won't put her any higher, she does have that little bit of execution. And a lot of Gwen's just default to go Nashes every game. And yeah, I don't want to start the debate too soon by Riftmaker versus Nashes. You need to know when to go each one. And short answer, if you verse some big scary beefcakes like Renekton or Jax and you build Riftmaker, if you build Nash's tube, you're a free kill. So you need to know when to go Riftmaker, when to go Nashes. That's not really why I've got her low, but it is a problem to watch out for. And I would say, yeah, after the buff, she's going to be in a really good position, around middle of A tier. I might move her up here by the end of it, but for now, I'll keep an eye on her in the middle of A. Now, other than that, the meta doesn't change too much. The D-Shield nerf is going to be painful for certain champions. So if we move down to B tier, champs like Set, champs like Dr. Mundo, who normally like to go D-Shield second win. Set can go Blade, of course, but Mundo only Shield. They are going to struggle a bit more. So Mundo, you might be surprised to see. It's not because of the nerf, it's because of the nerf to him, or the adjustment, whatever it is. It's mainly to do with the D-Shield second wind. The E damage, the extra armor doesn't really do anything, but the D-Shield second wind, it matters a lot. And another notable champion in B tier probably has to be Ambessa. You might be surprised to see her so low. And that's just because to really min-max what this champion can offer in lane, to really abuse your range advantage on all of your spells and your passive, to really put your opponent to the dirt, that's a really hard skill to master. A lot of players in Emerald Diamond can play Ambessa and go even, or even win a little bit, but to really get the value out of this champion, and use that advantage to push the pace of the game 1 to 2 item spike, that's still a really hard skill to master, compared to champions that scale a lot better, or have a bit easier execution. Now, other than him, Teemo's one that you could be surprised to see low, because in Master Plus, I had him really high A tier, and in Below Emerald, I'm going to have him high A tier as well, and that's just similar reasoning to Ambessa. This is a champion where you really need to min-max your lane advantage, where if we compare him to champions like KO and Urgot, sure, even if you're better at spacing, compared to in Silver and Gold, stuff like that, you're going to do a bit better. But on KO and Urgot, you don't need to get a big advantage. If you go level 9 Black Cleaver even on Urgot, you're doing great. If you get to Nash's Tooth even on KO, you're doing amazing. Teemo's not like that. You want to be getting an advantage, and the mid-game macro is really hard for Teemo as well. You don't really offer a lot to the game unless you really understand how to be creative and abuse your mushroom placement. Now, other than him, the champions that are below him, the other range top laners, they're just too difficult to execute, I would say. If you take 1 or 2 bad trades on a Jace or an Aurora, or even the players that are good at trading, if you die to a gank or 2, you're going to be pretty useless, so these champions will stay there for now. I'd say, D1, D2, they'd go up to A tier, of course, so there is some variance there. Now, Trundle, he would be C in a Diamond list, and, B in an Emerald one, so I'll just keep him low B tier for now. Same with Volibear. Now, for our C and below, so there are 2 types of champs here. The main one I want to talk about is champions that have really high skill ceilings, really hard to execute, but they also don't offer what you want in these games. So the examples are Cassante and Rumble. They're my favorite examples for this because I only recommend those champions for Masters Plus. Because not only is it really difficult to min-max how strong you are early game in lane, but to push that pace of the game 1 to 2 item spike, kind of similar to Ambessa, but not on the same level, that's really difficult as well. So you really need to be good at that. I've seen a lot of Emerald students who are good at Cassante, and they get fed often, but they don't know how to close out the game. Really hard skill to learn. So I'd say keeping him in C tier is fair, and Rumble, similar, but even harder to really execute, get the most value out of him. D tier for him also. Now, other champions that aren't quite as difficult as him, they're just not what you want. Champs like Pantheon, you're not that strong inside, and you have to be really proactive with the plays you make around the map. Champs like Udyr have to be really on point with the proxy playstyle. I still don't think in Emerald and Diamond, they are that good at proxying consistently, and a lot of those players are still scared of getting ganked, stuff like that. On Udyr, you need to be really good at that style. And then, yeah, champs like GP, champs like Vayne, really high skill ceilings. Cassiopeia as well. That's kind of why they're all around that area. Or they just don't do anything, like Anasis, who doesn't really do much in the D-Shield second win nerf. Definitely going to hurt him as well. And for D tier, similar reasoning, either way too difficult like a Rengar, or just doesn't do anything like a Shyvana. And finally, we have our below Emerald tier list, and remember our big 3 criteria of what makes a champion great in these ranks. Number 1 is ease of execution. Even though Fiora could probably carry more games in Bronze or in Silver, you'd really rather be Garen if you are that Silver or that Gold player, because the ease of execution is going to make it easier for you to win games consistently without failing mechanically. Number 2 is going to be carry potential. You do not want to be playing Maokai in Bronze or in Silver, get your jungler fed and have him throw it all away. You need to be able to carry the boats and the logs by yourself. Number 3 is side lane power. Getting tier 2 towers in below Emerald ranks is so easy. There's no security. If you get ahead early game, use that lead to break tier 2s. You completely take over games by yourself. That's the best way to win. So that's why the S tier champions are all good at all 3 of those things. Of course, Garen is better at side laning than Olaf, but if you get a lead on Olaf, you've got access to builds like Triforce. You can do Hullbreaker if you want. You can make it work, and this champion has amazing ease of execution and carry potential as well. Now, not a lot has changed, to be honest. The things I've moved up, like Urgot, like KO, like Teemo, is because the D-Shield second win nerf. You don't really have to execute any differently. You're just going to feel it straight away. They are going to get less sustain back, so it's going to be easier for you on these champions. Champs like Mundo have moved down a little bit, but not too much. I still believe Mundo's the king of eating tier 2 towers. So even with the D-Shield second win nerf, because the players you're playing against in these lower ranks aren't going to be as good at punishing you, you should still be able to get your Warmogs not that scathed. And other champions in A tier, champs like Darius, I'd say pretty middle of the pack. D-Shield nerf will hurt him a little bit, but you don't really go second one that often on him, so it's not going to be a big difference. Now for B tier, I've moved Gwen up the top. I would put her in low A tier if this was Platinum, but because it's below Emerald, I'm going to keep her in B tier, kind of even it out. The champion does have a lot harder execution than most of the champions above her, so that's why I've got her here. Even though her carry potential and side lane power is quite high, the ease of execution is lacking there. Another champion I've moved around is Jax. Even though he did get a recent buff, the patch that just dropped with D-Shield second win nerf hurts his execution even more, and in my opinion this champion is one of the harder champions to play in. That doesn't look hard. Of course Riven and Fiora, Irelia, we know they're difficult. Jax's kit seems quite simple, but in my opinion he requires over 300-400 games to be consistent on, and it's going to be really hard to execute in these lower ranks, especially with the D-Shield second win nerf. Quinn nerf doesn't really change anything. I've moved it down a little bit, but not too much. And other than that, the reasoning's the same. Jace, Irelia, Gangplank, the patch doesn't really change them. Of course, in ththese lower ranks, even though D-Shield second win nerf's better for Jace, the execution's still way too hard. I'd rather put my money on the Silver Garen or the Warwick playing up against the Silver Jace. That's not really going to change, even if D-Shield gets nerfed and D-Blade gets buffed a little bit. And for D tier, pretty similar, either too hard to execute or just a very, very low carry potential. Shin and Tahm Kench, easy to execute, but can't really carry games that well, so that's the reasoning for them there. Alright team, that's it for now. If you have any questions as usual, let me know in the comments. Good luck on the patch, and I'll see you all next time.